Nelson Mandela. Who was Nelson Mandela? What if you lived in a country where you were judged by the color of your skin? If almost everyone you knew was black, but the government was controlled by a few white people? The government told you where to live, where you could go to school. If they wanted the land you lived on, they could take it. White people made all the laws. They also decided who would rule the country. That was the way it was in South Africa, where Nelson Mandela lived. Mandela believed all people should be treated the same. The color of their skin should not matter. He became a fighter for equal rights. It was a hard battle. He spent many years in prison because of his beliefs, but he did not quit. His fight against racism made him a hero to people all around the world. Equal rights, treating all people the same. Racism, treating people poorly because of their race. Under the words to know section. In his own words, real leaders must be ready to sacrifice all for the freedom of their people. This is an actual sign in South Africa. Apartheid in South Africa. There were laws that kept black and white people apart. Those laws were called apartheid. Black Africans had to live in their own section of town. They had their own school and hospital that were not as nice as the ones for the other people, the white people, and it was a crime for them to eat in restaurants for white people or to ride white-only buses. The son of a chief, Mandela was born in South Africa village of Mvezo on July 18, 1918. His father named him Rolilaha. Sorry about the pronunciation, which means troublemaker. Words to know. Tribe, a group of people who share the same language and culture. Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland. There is Mvezo and Kunu. These are two very important places. Mandela was born in Mvezo and then later went to Kunu. A hut like the one Mandela was born in. His father was a chief of the Thembu tribe. One day when Mandela was very young, his father disagreed with a white judge in the village, and the angry judge removed Mandela's father from his position as chief. He also took the family's land. Mandela's mother moved her family to a farm in the nearby village of Kunu. That's a fact. In the culture of Thembu, men could have more than one wife at the same time. Mandela's father had 4 wives and 13 children. A new home. The family lived in 3 huts. One was for sleeping, one for cooking, and one for storage. The huts had mud walls, dirt floors, and grass roofs. Everyone had work to do. Mandela began herding goats and sheep when he was only 5 years old. South African men returning home to their village of Kunu. That's what this picture is of. When Mandela was 7, Mandela became the first person in his family to attend school. On the first day, the teacher gave the students English names. She said he would be called Nelson. Mandela sometimes wore a blanket wrapped around one shoulder and pinned at the waist. That's a fact. Changes. In 1930, Mandela's father died. He had been a friend to the king of Thembu people and after his death, the king invited 12-year-old Mandela to live with him. Mandela's mother did not want to let her son go, but she knew the king could give him a good life. This banner hangs in the great place where Mandela, also called Madiba, lived with the king. Mandela was sad as he left Konu. He wondered if he would ever see his village or his family again. When he got to the village of Mkhehezeni, Mandela could not believe his eyes. The king had the grandest home, and the king had the grandest home he had ever seen. It included 2 houses and 7 huts, and it was known as the Great Place. Mandela as a young man. Sorry about the glare. There's a little glare on the book. Let's try moving it here. Okay. Mandela learned his first lessons about being a good leader from the king. In tribal meetings, the king gave everyone a chance to talk. He listened carefully to what each person said. The chiefs who visited the Great Place taught Mandela and the history of the tribe. The chiefs who visited the Great Place taught Mandela about the history of the tribe, and they told him stories about African heroes. Mandela's education continued in a one-room school next door to the Great Place until he was 15. Then he went to the Clarkberry Boarding Institute about 60 miles away. In 1937, he moved to Helltown to attend college. This is an actual picture of Mandela as a young man. And this is Mandela in his college. This is Headtown College class picture 1938. There you are, Mandela. Let's see you a little closer. Focus. There you are. Okay. In his time, in the 1920s, when Nelson Mandela was a child, life in South Africa was very different from how it is now. School. Many black children did not attend school at all. Most who did went to one-room schools in their villages. The schools were run by people who traveled to South Africa to work for their church. Home life. A few wealthy families in Mandela's village were able to buy sugar, tea, coffee, but most people ate only what they grew. That included beans, pumpkins, and corn, and they drank milk from cows and goats. Transportation. Many white people drove cars, but Mandela and most others in the village walked. Toys and free time. Children in Mandela's village made their own toys using clay and sticks. They played games such as hide and seek and tag, and boys enjoyed stick fighting. History. South Africa was ruled by white European settlers, and they owned much of the land and made all the laws. Student protest. Mandela started classes at Fort Hare University when he was 20 years old. He worked hard at his studies, but he had fun too. He was on the cross-country running team, and he also played soccer. Fort Hare University. This is an actual picture of Fort Hare University in South Africa. In his second year, Mandela was elected to serve on the student council. There were about 150 students, but only 25 of them voted. The others were upset about the bad food served in the cafeteria. They protested by not voting. Mandela wanted to support the other students. He said he would not serve on the student council. The principal said Mandela needed to take his place on the student council or leave the school, so Mandela left. Words to know. Elected, chosen for a position or office by the act of voting. Protest, to speak or act in a way that shows you do not agree with something. Runaway. Back at the Great Place, Mandela learned the king was arranging a marriage for him. Mandela was not ready to get married, so he ran away to Johannesburg. An arranged marriage. Families decided who their children should marry. Often the marriage is used to bring two families together. Sometimes one family gives the other family money or gifts as part of the arrangement. an arranged marriage ceremony in Africa. Look at the beautiful couple. It was a large modern city, Johannesburg. Mandela had to live in a section for black people only. The homes in that area were small and they had no electricity or running water. The only work many black men could find was in the gold and diamond mines in the area. White owners were getting rich from the mines, but the black miners worked long hours for very little pay. Mandela's first home in Johannesburg. Wow. New ideas. Mandela got a job working as a clerk in the law office of a white lawyer. He wanted to become a lawyer, and this was his first step. He also took classes to finish college. He met many people in Johannesburg. Some of them were members of the African National Congress, the ANC, a group that was working for equal rights for black Africans. Mandela joined them in 1944. That same year, he married Evelyn Mace, the cousin of one of his best friends. They had 2 sons and 2 daughters. Sadly, one daughter died as a baby. Words to know: lawyer, a person whose job is to help people with things related to the law. That's the fact. Black Africans who were at least 16 years old had to carry a passbook. It showed who they were and where they lived. An ANC rally in Johannesburg for equal pay and voting rights. This is what this picture is of. An ANC rally in Johannesburg for equal pay and voting rights. By the 1950s, Mandela had become a leader in the ANC. He helped to organize marches and strikes. He was also busy with work. In 1952, he and his friend Oliver Tambo set up the first black law office in South Africa. Mandela left early in the morning for work, and in the evenings he had ANC meetings. Many times he did not get home until late at night. His children were already sleeping. His oldest son asked why his father was not there more. Mandela tried to explain. He was working to make life better for millions of black Africans. Words to know: strike, a kind of protest in which a people or group of people stop work until they are treated fairly. This is Mandela, an actual picture, in his law office. That's a fact. Mandela started law school but had to stop after passing a written test. He was allowed to practice law. A long trial. In 1956, Mandela was arrested along with 155 other activists. They were charged with treason or trying to overthrow the government. The trial lasted 4 years. Mandela's wife, Evelyn, did not agree with his work with the ANC. One day during their trial, she took their children and left. Their marriage was over. Words to know: activist, a person who works to make changes. Treason, the crime of trying to overthrow or take over a country's government. The trial was still going on when he met Winnie Madikizela. They were married in 1958 and had 2 daughters. That's a fact. Winnie and Mandela shared many of the same ideas. She also joined the ANC. A new direction. The trial finally ended in 1961. Mandela and those tried with him were found not guilty. After the trial, Mandela went into hiding. The government was watching him very closely. It was too dangerous for him to do his work with the ANC out in the open. He moved often so the police would not find him, and he met with other ANC members in secret. Mandela said peaceful protests were not working. It was time to take stronger action. He helped create a military branch of the ANC and became its leader. Mandela traveled to other countries to get their help. He also trained to become a soldier. Life in prison. Soon after Mandela returned to South Africa, he was arrested. This time he was found guilty of leaving the country without a passport and of leading a strike. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. While he was serving his sentence, he was put on trial again. This time he was charged with trying to overthrow the government. Words to know, sentenced to be told in a court of law what the punishment for a crime will be. On June 11, 1964, he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. Mandela was 45 years old. He was sent to the Robben Island prison off the coast of Cape Town. His cell was small. When he lay down to sleep, his head touched one wall and his feet touched the other. His bed was a thin mat on the floor, and he was given a bucket to use as a toilet. That's a fact. During his first years in prison, Mandela could have only 2 visitors a year. 8 cool facts about Mandela. In prison, Mandela secretly wrote a book about his fight for equal rights. That book, Long Walk to Freedom, was published in 1994. Mandela enjoyed boxing for exercise. Mandela was the 466th prisoner at Robben Island in 1964. His prison number, 466-64, became a sign of freedom. To keep fit while he was in prison, Mandela ran in place for 45 minutes, and then he did 200 sit-ups and 100 push-ups. Mandela planted a garden in the prison courtyard, and he grew vegetables and fruit for both prisoners and guards. Mandela has received more than 1,000 awards. More than 45 schools have been named after him. One leader Mandela admired was Abraham Lincoln. Mandela learned about him in school. Nelson Mandela International Day is celebrated every year on his birthday, July 18th. Free Mandela. In prison, Mandela was a leader. He used peaceful protests to help the prisoners get better food. They also got books so they could study, and other prisoners and even some of the white guards admired Mandela. He was brave and never gave up hope. Free Mandela. That's a fact. In 1988, 72,000 people attended a concert to celebrate Mandela's 70th birthday. Millions more watched at home. Outside the prison. He was not forgotten. In the 1980s, the ANC started a Free Mandela campaign. Free Mandela posters went up around the world. Students marched to show their support. Other governments put pressure on South Africa. They would not buy products made in South Africa or play sports against the country's team. A Nelson Mandela Freedom Festival in London in 1986. Words to Know campaign, a group of activities planned to get a certain result. Talking about peace. In 1982, after 18 years at Robben Island, Mandela was moved to a different prison on the streets. Fighting between the police and the protesters was getting worse. Mandela knew it was time for a change. While still in prison, he met with people from the South African government, and they talked about peace and equal rights. In 1989, F.W. de Klerk became the new president of South Africa. He also wanted peace. In February 11, 1990, he released Mandela from prison. Mandela was 71 years old, and he had spent 27 years of his life in prison. Thousands cheered as Mandela walked away from prison with Winnie by his side. Wow. In his words, "My life was beginning anew. My 10,000 days of imprisonment were at last over." There was still a lot of work to do. Mandela and President de Klerk had many meetings to talk about the future of South Africa. They did not always agree, but they worked together to end apartheid. They also worked to create a free country where people of all races could vote. In April 27, 1994, black Africans in South Africa were able to vote for the first time. They elected Mandela. He became the first black president of South Africa. He was 75 years old. As president, he talked about forgiveness. The country had been divided. Now it was time for people of all races to work together. An award for peace. In 1993, Mandela and F.W. de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. It is an international award, the highest honor given to someone who has worked for peace. A new life. During Mandela's many years in prison, he and Winnie had both changed. They ended their marriage in 1996. 2 years later, on his 80th birthday, Mandela married Graça Machel. Mandela served one 5-year term as president, and then he stepped down. He said it was time for a younger person to lead. In 1999, he began spending most of his time at his house in Johannesburg. Mandela being sworn in as president in 1994. There's him and his new wife, Mandela, and his wife Graça. President Mandela shows U.S. President Clinton his jail cell. Thabo Mbeki replaced Mandela as president. Excuse me, I probably mispronounced that. Here's the timeline. 1918, born at Mvezo, South Africa on July 18th. 1930, his father died. 1941, runs away to Johannesburg. 1944, joins the ANC and marries Evelyn Mace. 1952, opens the first black law firm of South Africa in South Africa. 1958, marries Winnie Madikizela. Okay, that's wrong too. Mandela also had a country home in Kunu, the village where he lived as a child. He listened to music, spent time with family, and enjoyed watching the sunset. They were all things he had not been able to do for many, many years. When he was in prison, he died on December 5th, 2013, when he was 95 years old. It was a sad day for people around the world as they remembered the man who had inspired them. He taught us about courage. As he fought bravely for equal rights, he showed us hope, never giving up, even when almost everything was taken from him. He taught us to forgive and showed us how to live in peace. He united a nation and changed the world, making it a better place for everyone. 1964, sentenced to life in prison. 1990, released from prison. 1994, elected President of South Africa. 1998, marries Graça Machel. 1999, steps down as president. 2013, dies on December 5th. Be a quiz whiz. See how many questions you can get right. Mandela was given the name Nelson by, excuse me, I'm just trying to get the glare away. Mandela was given the name Nelson by his parents, A, his teacher, B, the king of Thembu tribe, C, or a white judge, D. Which one could it be? If you know it, shout out the answer. The answer is B, his first teacher. After his father died, Nelson went to live at A. the palace, B. the kingdom, C. the great place, or D. Johannesburg. Dun, 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 dun. So, have you had time to think? What is the answer? The answer is C, the great place. Look at that boxer. When he was 20, Mandela moved to Johannesburg, started playing sports. A, moved to Johannesburg. B, started playing sports. C, began classes at Fort Hare University. Or D, got a job at a law office. When he was 20, Mandela C. began classes at Fort Hare University. Nelson Mandela International Day is celebrated on A. January 15th, B. May 3rd, C. July 18th, or D. September 21. Which one is it? Dun, 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 Which one is it? Nelson Mandela International Day is celebrated on C. July 18th. That's the day of his birthday. In 1964, Mandela was found guilty of trying to overthrow the government and sentenced to A. 4 years in prison, B. 35 years in prison, 35 years of hard labor, C. 50 years in prison, D. life in prison. Which one is it? Dun, 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 In 1964, Mandela was found guilty of trying to overthrow the government and sentenced to D. life in prison. Number 6. In 1990, Mandela was released from prison after how many years in prison? A. 18, B. 27, C. 35, or D. 41. Dun, 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 dun. Well, I hope you had enough time to think about it. The answer is, in 1990, Mandela was released from prison after 27 years in prison. B. Laws in South Africa are kept that